He showed up on the evening I seriously thought I might not matter to anyone anymore. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 46 that fall, and for 3 weeks I had been living the same day over and over in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kitchen, back porch, couch, then back again. The small manufacturing company I'd worked for nearly 15 years had closed its doors, and ever since then, I'd been moving around my own house like I was borrowing it from somebody else. That evening, the yard looked especially neglected. The grass had gone uneven, the flower bed along the fence had given up, and there was an empty coffee mug on my boot that I'd been too tired to bring inside. I remember staring at it like it had personally offended me. Then, something small moved under the leaning section of fence between my yard and the alley. At first, I thought it was a squirrel, but it wasn't. It was a tiny black kitten, a little stray domestic shorthair, maybe 10 or 11 weeks old at most. He was all sharp caution and skinny legs with those watchful eyes animals get when the world has never once been gentle by default. He stopped a few feet from my steps and looked at me like he wasn't scared exactly. More like he had already decided I needed to earn the next second. He didn't cry, didn't come close, didn't ask for food. He walked forward, set down a plastic bottle cap right by the bottom step, then hopped back so fast it was like he'd completed some private assignment and needed distance to evaluate the result. I actually laughed, not politely. Not because something was kind of funny. I mean a real laugh. The kind that surprises you because you haven't heard it come out of your own chest in a while. The kitten stood there, low to the ground, staring at me, waiting. When I leaned forward and picked up the bottle cap, he twitched one ear, turned, and slipped back through the gap in the fence like a piece of shadow being pulled away. I sat there with that stupid little cap in my hand for longer than I want to admit. And the strangest part wasn't that he had brought it to me. It was that, for the rest of the night, I couldn't stop wondering whether he'd come back tomorrow. The next evening, I went out to the yard earlier than usual, pretending it was accidental, even though it absolutely wasn't. I told myself it was ridiculous. A 46-year-old man sitting on a creaky back porch, quietly waiting for a kitten like he had nothing better to do. Which, at that point, maybe I didn't. The air had that damp, early fall chill to it, and I was halfway through convincing myself he wasn't coming when I saw the fence shift. There he was again. Same careful walk, same alert eyes, same look like he was measuring the distance between us in more than feet. This time he had a yellow leaf in his mouth. Not just any leaf either. It was almost whole, bright against the dull ground, like he'd gone out of his way to find the one good piece of color left in the alley. He brought it to the bottom step, laid it down closer than the bottle cap had been, then backed away and sat there watching me. There was nothing soft about his expression. No sweetness, no pleading. He looked weirdly serious, like he had assigned himself a job. Like he'd decided that since I kept sitting out there alone, somebody needed to bring me things. So I went inside, found an old bowl, filled one with water and another with a little cat food I still had from years ago. I set them down and stepped back up 2 stairs. He waited. Then he came forward, quick and low, drank first, then ate like he didn't trust the meal to remain his for long. After that, I started keeping the things he brought me in a kitchen drawer, though I couldn't have explained why. First the bottle cap, then the leaf. On the 3rd day, a small dried flower. On the 4th, a shiny metal washer from God knows where. Every single time he showed up in the same kind of moment too, right when that heavy thought started creeping in again. That maybe I had become unnecessary not just to a company, but to life itself. Then one evening, my neighbor Marissa looked over the fence and caught me crouched by the steps, staring at a kitten like he was delivering state secrets. She watched him trot out of the alley, drop off his latest offering, then disappear again. And she said, "You know that little guy only comes to you, right?" I looked at her, then at the place by the step where he'd been standing. And somehow that landed harder than it should have. After Marissa said that, something shifted in my head. Up until then, I'd been treating it like a strange little coincidence. A scrappy black kitten happened to pass through my yard and happened to leave things behind. But once she said he only came to me, it stopped feeling random. It started feeling like a pattern, almost a ritual. So I began paying attention. He always came from the same direction, slipping in through the gap near the back fence after cutting across the narrow alley behind our row of houses. That alley was the kind of place nobody really looked at unless they had to. Trash bins, a rusted handrail, an old detached garage with a crooked door that looked like it had given up years ago. A stack of wooden pallets leaned against one wall like they were holding each other up. That evening, the temperature dropped fast. Wind pushed through the alley hard enough to rattle loose metal and send dry leaves scraping across the pavement. I sat on the porch longer than usual listening for him. He didn't come. For 10 minutes, I told myself that was fine. He was a stray kitten. He didn't owe me consistency. He didn't owe me anything. Then I grabbed a flashlight and went looking for him anyway. I hated how much that admitted. How worried I already was over a creature that still wouldn't let me touch him. The alley smelled like wet wood and cold concrete. I passed the bins, swept the flashlight low, and then heard it, a quick little rustle from near the old garage. I found him tucked behind the pallets in a dark corner. He wasn't trapped, not physically. Nothing was on him. Nothing was blocking him in. He was just frozen there, crouched tight, eyes wide, because every time the loose lid on one of the bins slammed in the wind, his whole body flinched. So I sat down right there on the cold asphalt a few feet away. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "Yeah, I don't really feel like coming out either, buddy." He watched me. He didn't move closer, but he didn't run. The wind kept pushing through the alley. The bin lid clanged again. He lowered himself even more, but his eyes stayed on me the whole time. And for the first time, I understood something I hadn't let myself say out loud yet. He wasn't just bringing me little objects. He was watching to see if I'd still be there when things felt uncomfortable and uncertain. The next morning, my phone rang while I was standing in the kitchen, still holding the same mug I'd forgotten to wash the night before. It was about a job, not some dream opportunity, nothing that would make for a triumphant movie moment. It was a warehouse position on the other side of Pittsburgh. Early shifts, long days, a lot of lifting, inventory, loading, unloading, the kind of work you take because it's work, and because when you've been out of work long enough, pride starts sounding expensive. The man on the phone asked if I could come in for an interview. Any reasonable person would have said yes, without a second thought. I knew that. I did say yes. But the second I hung up, this stupid thought hit me so fast it actually made me stand still in the middle of the kitchen. If I took that job, I might not be home at the hour the kitten usually came by. It felt ridiculous even inside my own head. I needed income, structure, a reason to get dressed in the morning. And yet there I was, staring out the back window like some part of me was already counting what I might lose. That afternoon, Marissa was outside pulling weeds along the fence line when she spotted the empty food bag by my steps. She nodded toward the alley and said, "Just so you know, they're cleaning out behind these houses next week. The vacant duplex finally sold." I asked what cleaning out meant. She shrugged. "Nothing dramatic, just workers, trucks, noise, hauling junk, clearing the yards and that whole alley stretch. Nothing dramatic. But for a tiny stray kitten who disappeared into that alley every night, it meant something very specific. His hiding places, his quiet routes, that crooked old garage, the spaces he trusted because nobody else noticed them. All of it could be gone in a day. That was when it stopped being a sweet little porch story. For the first time, I was staring at a real choice. I needed that job. I needed to pull myself out of the hole I'd been living in. But if I went right back to thinking survival was the only thing that mattered, if I ignored the one small creature that had somehow decided to trust me, then what exactly had I learned? That evening, he came later than usual. He crossed the yard carefully, something trailing from his mouth, and laid it near my step. A short piece of frayed string. Just a scrap, barely anything. But the second I picked it up, it felt like a thread thin enough to break and strong enough to hold me there. That night I decided I needed to stop pretending this would somehow solve itself. Feeding him on the porch wasn't enough anymore. Not with the alley about to be cleared out. Not with the weather turning colder. If I was going to do right by him, I had to get him off the street before his few safe places disappeared. Marissa came over the next afternoon with a cat carrier and an old faded towel that smelled faintly like laundry soap. She showed me how to set it down sideways so it didn't look too much like a trap. She told me not to make big gestures, not to crowd him, not to act tense because animals always know. I tried to listen. I really did. But the second he saw the carrier by my steps, everything changed. He stopped dead in the yard, the way a wild thing does when some invisible alarm goes off inside it. He didn't bolt right away. That almost made it worse. He just stood there, staring at it, then at me, then back at it again, and slowly backed up like I had lied to him in a language he understood perfectly. That evening, he didn't come close. He left a little curled leaf in the grass, a couple feet from the step, and disappeared before I even stood up. The next night, it was a bottle tab. Same distance, same caution, same message. I sat in the kitchen after that with the stupid carrier near the door, feeling more rattled than I should have. But the truth was, I knew exactly why it hit me so hard. When the company shut down, people kept offering me practical things. Options, next steps, advice. They meant well, I guess. But when you're already barely holding yourself together, all those reasonable plans can sound like one thing. We need to move you along now, before your stuckness becomes inconvenient. And there I was doing the same thing to him. Late that night, I opened the kitchen drawer and laid everything out on the table. The plastic bottle cap, the yellow leaf, the dried flower, the metal washer, the frayed piece of string. It looked ridiculous, honestly, like the kind of collection a child might defend with complete seriousness. But standing there in that dim kitchen light, I realized it wasn't junk at all. It was proof. Proof that something small and wary had chosen me, day after day, for reasons I still didn't fully understand. And the question that stayed with me was the one I couldn't dodge anymore. If this got hard, really hard, was I going to choose him back? The turn came the next morning, and it came quietly. I woke up with that heavy kind of emptiness that makes even small things feel unreasonable. Washing my face felt like too much. Making coffee felt unnecessary. I just put on yesterday's sweatshirt and opened the back door because I didn't know what else to do. Then I stopped right there on the threshold. Spread out on the porch boards, directly in front of the door, was everything he had gathered overnight. Not dropped. Not scattered. Arranged. A red leaf, a silver pull tab from a can, one small white petal, a short piece of soft string, a smooth gray stone. Each one set down with little spaces between them, almost evenly, like he had taken his time and kept coming back while I slept. I stood there looking at it for a long moment, not moving. It was such a strange, simple thing. A kitten's idea of treasure. But the care in it hit me harder than anything anyone had said to me in months. It felt like a message made out of scraps. I came back. I looked for you. Here, hold on to this. My throat tightened so fast I had to sit down on the top step. For the first time since losing my job, I didn't think of myself as a man who had stalled out. I didn't think about what I'd failed at or what I was behind on or how small my life had become. I thought about the fact that one tiny black kitten had spent his whole night bringing things to my door. As if returning me to the morning was a job worth doing. I went back inside, picked up my phone, and called about the interview before I could talk myself out of it. I didn't cancel. I just asked if I could come in a couple hours later. The man on the line paused, then said that would be fine. After that, I took the carrier by the door and moved it into the laundry room where he couldn't see it from the yard. No trap. No setup. No trying to outsmart him. I slipped the little collection into my jacket pocket and headed for the alley with no real plan at all. The wind had eased, but the whole place felt different that morning, like it was already bracing for disruption. I could hear distant engine noise from farther down the block, and somewhere metal clanged against pavement. I kept walking toward the crooked garage, toward the pallets, toward the place he disappeared into each night. Because whatever happened next, it couldn't be about forcing him. It had to be about whether he would trust me enough to come out before the clearing started. By late afternoon, the alley was already alive with noise. Not chaos, exactly. Just the kind of loud, practical disruption that means the world has moved on and expects everything in its way to do the same. Men were hauling warped boards away from the old garage. Somebody dragged a dented bin across the pavement. Wood knocked against brick. Metal rattled. A truck idled at the far end of the lane. I heard him before I saw him, that quick little rustle I'd learned to recognize. Small, fast, close. My heart dropped so hard it almost felt physical because there were too many boots, too many voices, too many places for something tiny to disappear. Then I saw them. Two round eyes in the narrow gap between a stack of boards and the brick wall beside the garage. He wasn't stuck. He could have moved if he could make himself move. But fear had him held in place tighter than anything else could have. His body was folded small, ears low, every inch of him trying to become less visible. I couldn't rush him. I couldn't crawl in and grab him. I couldn't pull out the carrier now and turn this into one more moment where trust got replaced by pressure. And I couldn't tell myself I'd figure it out later. So I sat down right there in the dirt, in full view of the workers, and reached into my jacket pocket. One by one, I laid his strange little gifts on the pavement between us. The bottle cap, the yellow leaf, the dried flower, the washer, the piece of string, the smooth stone. My voice came out low and rough when I spoke. No speech, no big moment. Mostly I think I was talking to both of us. I know what it feels like, I said, when everything around you gets moved around and you're supposed to act like it's fine. But I'm here. I'm not leaving first. He didn't come right away. First, his nose appeared, then one paw. Then the rest of him, inch by inch, black and tiny and tense as a pulled wire. He walked to the little collection and sniffed each piece like he needed to make sure it was really there. Then he looked up at me, and for the first time since he'd found my porch, he stepped close enough to touch me on purpose. Just a small press of his forehead against my finger. That was all. But in that second, I understood something I hadn't known how to name before. Rescue doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just the moment two frightened beings decide to believe each other. Getting him home wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the real part. He didn't turn into an easy, cuddly house kitten overnight. Honestly, I'm glad he didn't. It would have felt fake. For the first few days, he lived in a triangle between my kitchen table, the wall vent, and the space under an old wooden chair by the window. He ate only if I sat on the floor a few feet away and kept my eyes somewhere near my hands instead of on him. If I stood up too quickly, he vanished. If the ice maker dropped a cube, he stared at the ceiling like the house itself had betrayed him. At night, though, he checked on me. I didn't notice it the first time right away. I woke up half asleep on the couch and saw a small black shape at the edge of the hallway. He just stood there, looking at me, making sure I was still where he left me. Then he turned and disappeared back into the kitchen. A few days later, I gave him a name. Rook. Partly because of the color, partly because he moved quietly and watched everything, and partly because he never did anything halfway. Even his tiny offerings had always felt deliberate. I made the interview. I sat in a plastic chair in a warehouse office across town and answered questions like a man trying to re-enter his own life without making a big speech about it. The job wasn't glamorous. It wasn't supposed to be. But when they called me back, it didn't feel like falling into something smaller. It felt like rhythm, a reason to stand up, put on boots, and go. And somewhere in all of that, I stopped telling myself I had nothing left to give. Because every morning, right by the door while I laced my shoes, I'd find something waiting for me. A scrap of paper, a dry leaf, once a ridiculous little piece of string that Rook dragged across the kitchen with the seriousness of a man delivering medicine. I don't keep those things in the drawer anymore. Now they go in a small glass jar on the windowsill above the sink. Not as proof of a sad season, not as some shrine to being lost, just as a quiet reminder that even when I thought I had disappeared from my own life, one tiny, wary stray looked at me and decided I was still someone worth returning to. That was how I found my way back. Not through a grand plan, not through some sudden transformation. Through a black kitten who couldn't say a word and still kept finding ways to tell me I was seen.